Hey everybody, welcome back to another SpinoCast. So, we are talking about Prehistoric Planet Episode 2 today, Deserts. Last time we talked about coasts. And oh boy, another absolute banger of an episode. This show is like my favorite thing ever at the moment. So, let's just jump right into it. We start off the episode with just the coolest thing ever. We have a herd of Dreadnoughtus. And we have a herd of males that are coming into, almost like elephant seals, they're coming into the midst of a bunch of females, and they're getting ready to brawl it out to see who has the right to mate with the females. And I knew this scene was going to be awesome. Let me adjust myself in my chair. I'm not comfortable right now. Sorry for the creaking. I need a new chair, man. This is awful. This thing's falling apart. I've got duct tape all over it. All right, we're off track, but here we go. We're back on now. Right. So, the thing that's awesome about this scene is I knew it was going to be cool. I pretty much knew what was going to happen based on the trailers and everything. But they still exceeded my expectations with the execution. The music in this scene is the coolest thing. And just the attitude of the sauropods. This is the only time I can ever think in any sort of media that where a sauropod is portrayed as this really intimidating, aggressive, large creature, because they were huge. And not only is it aggressive, but they're being aggressive towards each other, which has never been seen before in media of this scale, which is really cool. And like I said, the music, there's borderline rock music playing during this thing as these two massive land animals, two of the biggest animals that ever walked on the planet, are just crashing into each other, and it's the coolest thing. I also love the introduction for them, going back to the first shot where it's like the sort of the battle of the salt plains with the Diplodocus walking across the salt plains and walking with dinosaurs and Big Al. Obviously, that has to be a reference to that. Like, come on. It has to be, and I love it. But my favorite music cue, I think, even more than the music from the battle between the Dreadnoughtus, is just when they're walking. And David Attenborough doesn't even need to say anything for a while. He just the camera pans up and zooms in on the Dreadnoughtus, and he just goes, "Dreadnoughtus," and that's it. And we have this awesome, like, aggressive baseline play as it shows birds flying in. He doesn't even need to explain the immense size of these animals initially. We have some small birds fly in and land on their back, and that's enough to show the audience, not tell them, that these things are massive. And it was so well executed. This whole scene was awesome. And just the cinematography, too, of, the sound design, first of all, when they're inflating their neck air sacs was dope. And just their noises in general, the hissing with them was really cool. And the cinematography, too, showing the female herd dispersing after the young male overthrew the previous alpha of the group. And just seeing the only thing left is the rotting body of the previous male there on the salt plains was bone-chilling the first time I saw it, with the music playing, really well executed. But anyway, so we've got that scene, which is dope. Then moving on to the next scene, which has a lot more things combined into it than I initially expected. Well, I guess not a lot more, just one more thing combined into it. I thought we were going to have a whole segment with the huge Azhdarchids in the desert, which we didn't get a name drop for them. But they're actually tied into the Tarbosaurus and Velociraptor segment, which is cool. So it opens up, we see a huge carcass of a sauropod, and then we see the Azhdarchids circling the carcass like vultures above, which is really cool. But what's awesome about this scene, which was very unexpected, is the protagonist, for lack of a better word, in this scene, is a tiny little lizard. They have a real lizard for some of the shots. Some of it is CGI as well, which honestly, I was struggling to tell which was which at times because the CG is that good in this show. And he's just trying to catch some flies. And he's following the flies around the desert, and he ends up coming across a group of Tarbosaurus sleeping in the sun after gorging themselves on the massive sauropod carcass. And all of the flies are being drawn to them because they were feeding on the carcass. And I just love that it offers this really it gives us an excuse for these really close-up shots to show off the incredible visual effects on the texturing for the Tarbosaurus and everything by having a little lizard darting around and looking for flies. And it also gives an excuse to show off Velociraptor in the scene, because Velociraptor is hunting the lizards. And I love the way the entrance, we've already seen the entrance for the Velociraptor, but it never gets old with that incredibly detailed model of the foot coming down with the dirt caked on the sickle claw and everything. And then just the head coming down. I mean, man, I don't know what people mean, like people say, I'm sorry, but people say like feathered dinosaurs aren't scary. Velociraptor looks intimidating as heck in this episode. It does. The round Raptorian pupils just really stare into your soul, especially when it's staring at the camera in a couple brief scenes, and it just looks so intimidating. I love it. The model is incredible. It's one of my favorite models in the whole show, and it was just making me geek out with my friends, just seeing a properly feathered dromaeosaurid in a show. And not only just properly feathered, but just completely accurate, too, for a velociraptor. And anyway, it goes after the lizard, and there's actually a pair of them there that are hunting. And it catches one of the lizards, and then the other one that goes after the other lizard, the lizard runs under the Tarbosaurus for safety, and the Velociraptor ends up waking up the Tarbosaurus. And I love just the casual frustration, the energy that the Tarbosaurus has. It doesn't ensue like this big, corny chase scene, like for example, I'll use Dinosaur Revolution as an example. That's the name of it. The intro sequence for the Jurassic episode, I think it was, with Broken Jaw the Allosaurus. We had this Looney Tunes-esque scene where there was an Ornitholestes being annoying towards a family of Allosaurus. So the mother Allosaurus stands up and walks over and bites the head off of the Ornitholestes and then walks back and falls asleep. And I'm like, since the first time I saw that, I'm like, come on. Come on, man. And what I love about this scene is this is something very similar where the Velociraptor was annoying the Tarbosaurus. And the Tarbosaurus turns around very lazily while it's on the ground and just snaps its jaws at the Velociraptor, which both of them run away. And the Tarbosaurus just lazily rolls over, stands up, and then is just on his jolly way with his buddies, and they all start waking up. There's no big chase scene. There's no dramatic like, oh, you disturbed me, therefore I must kill you. The Tarbosaurus was acting like a real animal. It was just like, hey, back off. That's a little too close, buddy. All right, I felt you touch me. There was like no sheer aggression or hatred in the scene from the Tarbosaurus. It was just like, keep your distance, pal. You know, we're resting here. And I really love that interaction. So that was that scene. And then we move on to, one of my absolute favorite dinosaurs. In this entire show so far, Mononychus, easily becoming one of my favorite dinosaurs in general now, just after it reminded me of in my opinion, very underrated study done on Shuvia, which is another alvarosaurid, which is related to Mononychus. I think it was a year or two ago that it came out. Basically, they did CT scans on the skull and they compared it to that of a barn owl, which has like the most acute hearing of any bird of prey that we know of today. And they found that they were very, very similar. So Mononychus had a great sense of hearing. And so they were thinking that, so the study sort of pitched the idea that they were thinking that they could have had facial discs like owls in their feathers that would have really assisted their hearing. And I love that this show completely reminded me of that, because I thought that was the coolest thing for a while, and it was sort of a fad on Instagram for a bit where people were, posting their paleo art and everything, but some people leaned too heavily into just making them like ground owls. But some people are also a little more reserved. Like I think the paleo art that was officially released with the paper, I'm pretty sure it was, had a really nice design, very similar to the one in Prehistoric Planet. But this design I adore. My favorite bird of prey is the barn owl, and it's one of my favorite birds in general. And you can obviously tell that this design is referencing a barn owl. Like, it's very obvious. And I really like what they did. And I'm tripping over myself, sorry. And I really like that they did that, because obviously the barn owl was used as a comparison in the paper for proving that it had a really acute, exceptionally well sense of hearing in Mononychus. And I like that this design, it's obviously referencing a barn owl, but it's not identical to a barn owl. Mainly with the upper back color, which is more of a sort of creamy brown, I want to say. It's just more of a straight brown, the more I'm looking at it here. Barn owls have very distinct golden and golden brown colors. There is some variation, of course, but they have a very distinct sort of golden color on their body. And then they also have a bunch of banding and speckling marking patterns all along the back. And I like that this one is obviously referencing a barn owl because of the study. And the colors also just make sense for its environment as well. And I like that they just sort of changed it up a little bit, and just so it wasn't a complete copy of the barn owl, which coloration can happen convergently in nature. There are a lot of animals that aren't related to each other that have almost nigh on identical color schemes. So I think it's cool that they did that, but they didn't make it an identical copy. And this scene was awesome as well. I love the sounds that the Mononychus makes, first of all. It's also one of my favorite models on the show for how convincingly realistic it looks. And the sound effects are absolutely adorable for the little, I don't know, kind of chipmunk noises it makes or something. Are really cute. And I love, too, it just gave me a good chuckle. It was so Planet Earth when they have the almost overly done sound effects, like overly dramatic sound effects, but they're supposed to be obvious and corny, which I think is really fun. And when the Mononychus reveals her claw in the scene, they have a sword unsheathing sound effect, which I think was really great. So that gave me and my friends a good chuckle. And she goes into a termite nest and starts eating some termites. She digs out the log and she sticks her snout in. And she has a long, flexible tongue as well that is, David Attenborough says, is twice the length of her head. Now, as far as I'm aware, we do not have any proof that that is a thing, but it's just a feature that would make sense for an animal that we assume, at the very least, ate termites because of its claws and smaller head and everything, and just an insectivorous animal. So, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong down below, if I missed something. I'm 90% sure I haven't missed something over the years. But yeah, I think this is just a speculative feature on Mononychus, but I think it's a really cool and feature that makes sense for this animal and the lifestyle that we think that it led. It gets some great scenes of it in the rain as well. The wet feathers on the model look absolutely stunning. And then we get a fun little sequence of her trying to adapt to the new plant life and the new insects and arthropods that are all showing up in her area, and just trying to adjust to finding new food sources. This is a really wholesome scene, and it was just a pleasant time just getting to see more of that model in action. I'm really happy we got a whole segment dedicated to that, so it reminded me of that awesome study. And yeah, Mononychus, I think just after this episode is in other Alvarezsaurids, but Mononychus in particular, just because of Prehistoric Planet, it's becoming one of my favorite dinosaurs now. Moving on, so the next scene we see a herd of Barsboldia, which me and my friend Gibson were guessing were Shantungosaurus in the trailer. We saw them in a brief scene, but Barsboldia, cool. I first heard of it from Path of Titans, and a really lesser known animal, so it's cool that we're getting to see that. We also see some sauropods. These are all animals that are converging at a local watering hole oasis. And these sauropods, I originally guessed, because I thought that the Hadrosaurs were Shantungosaurus, I was going to guess that they were Zhucheng Titan, based on what was found in the formation. But turns out that the Hadrosaur, of course, is Barsboldia, and these were just referred to as the Mongolian Titan. And from what I've heard, these are based off of the footprint that was found, or footprints, I don't know if there are multiple, that were found in Mongolia, which shows like an absolutely massive Titanosaur footprint. And I did talk about that briefly in my Safari Ltd Patago Titan review, when talking about the back feet on the Patago Titan. So this whole design is just pretty much a generic Titanosaur design. It's got really cool colors, and it's just kind of made up with our current knowledge of what other Titanosaurs look like to slot right into this ecosystem. But that was cool that they did that. And then we get a little cheeky cameo from the Therizinosaurus, and it looks really cool. And what I love about it too is because we're focused on the Mongolian Titan here, because David Attenborough makes a funny little remark saying, when you have the longest neck on Earth, you can skip the queue when there's a line waiting to drink out of the watering hole. So we're focused on the Zucheng Titan and the Barsboldia there, who are kind of getting shoved out of the way. But it took most of us a little while to realize that in plain sight on the side of the screen, there's a full-on Therizinosaurus right there, and the design looks awesome. And he's just drinking, and I just love how so many people seem to miss that, and it was in plain sight right there. In the background as well, we've got some Ankylosaurs. I'm not sure what kind those are. Maybe going to guess it's Tarkia? Would it be Tarkia because Tarbosaurus is here as well? Maybe I'm going to go ahead and maybe put my money on that. Yeah, we'll say Tarkia, if my mind serves me correctly. And then we get another really cool scene. So, a Tarbosaurus appears behind the sand dune and makes its way down, with some amazing cinematography too, makes its way down to the watering hole. And we're like, oh my gosh, are we going to get a hunt scene? Are we going to get a hunt scene? We didn't. But what we got was really cool subversion of expectations for just all dinosaur media, where this thing wasn't here to cause chaos and hunt anything, but the herd just peeled away like a lion coming to a watering hole or something, and let it have its space while the Tarbosaurus just had a drink, and that was the whole scene. And I love that so much. And basically, also spoiler alert, we haven't had a scene in the first 2 episodes of the show. The show is almost half over at this point, and we haven't had a scene yet showing a theropod dinosaur hunting anything yet. I'm just calling it that this is a record for a dinosaur documentary at this point, and I absolutely love it. I love that we're just showing different plausible behaviors for real animals, rather than just hunting and killing, which is not what they did constantly. And I love too, going back to the Tarbosaurus scene from earlier, that we didn't see them feeding or killing. If they did kill that sauropod, they might have found the carcass. But I love that we see the aftermath of these large carnivores that just gorged themselves on a carcass, just spread out and being lazy, sleeping in the sun. It felt so real and just grounded, and I adored it. And it gave the Tarbosaurs so much personality and made me love them even more. Alright, so we had that scene. And then the next scene, I think, is... Yes, we have Barbary Dactylus again. This time a mating scene. And hold on, I need a drink of water, guys. My throat is drying out talking so much. 1 second. Alright. That's good. Oh, that's so much better. It's very warm over here. It's like 90-something degrees or whatever. It's really starting to heat up in summertime. But and I need to leave my air conditioning unit off while I'm recording, or it's going to make an incessant buzzing noise. Anyway, so we have the Barbary Dactylus again in this episode, and this time they are all doing a courtship event. The females are all gathered on top of this cliffside, and the males are all fighting for the chance to mate with them. And it starts off with the 2 male Barbary Dactylus getting into a fight, and one chases the other one and ends up knocking it out of the sky. And this thing, the camera is like, keep in mind, the camera is like miles away from this scene. And we see it knock it out of the sky. And just the distance the camera is at makes you feel the impact even more when you see this little dot that is a fairly large pterosaur falling all the way down, hitting the sides of the cliff, and then crashing down and sliding in the sand. Like, it makes you kind of cringe when you first see it. You're like, oh, that dude got wrecked. And That was such a cool scene, and I love that they don't have all the action like forefront in your face just to show off their special effects. They hide a lot of it. And there goes my phone, whoever that is. Who is that? Who's texting me? Cesar. I'll talk to you in a minute. Anyway, I love that some of the action scenes we've seen in both episodes so far are very reserved as to how much they're showing us and how in your face it is, because it does feel like there are cameramen actually there who are peeled back from the action and just letting these creatures do their thing. And if they happen to catch anything on camera, they just happen to, which I really, really enjoy. And then my friend Eric was nerding out about this. He told me about this behavior. Keep in mind, for people who aren't aware, this behavior is a real thing in nature. This happens with birds, and it's so cool that they did this with pterosaurs. But with some birds today, for example, there are some male birds that have evolved to look like female birds. So when they get into the groups of females, they are incognito, among us, imposter among us, sus, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. So they're all incognito undercover, Mission Impossible style. And so they can mate with the females and get out of there without being detected. And what I love is that they embrace this with pterosaurs, but in the case of this one, this male still has the colors of a male, but it has the head crest of a female. So this one swoops in and starts scouting out the females, and there's another Barbary Dactylus male with the huge head crest, of course, on patrol, and he manages to to spot the imposter. But the imposter dude is like, oh no, I've been spotted kind of thing. And the regular male struts over, but he's still confused and he thinks he's a female, and he starts doing a strutting like mating display. And the other imitation female Barbary Dactylus just like does the female rejection display towards him and manages to escape, and then does a dance for another female and manages to mate with her. So that was just cool that they managed to show that really unique and just awesome behavior that is a real thing in nature today that we've documented with pterosaurs. I think that's awesome because pterosaurs especially have these huge ornate crests on their head that were obviously used for display purposes. And I think it's cool that they took advantage of that for writing purposes in this show. Anyways, moving on to the next and the final scene, we have, I need to look this up. Yes, Cesarosaurus, which I've never heard of before, a kind of dwarf hadrosaur. This is probably the least eventful scene in the show, in this episode, and probably in the show as well. It might just be, if I had to pick a least favorite, it would be this one, just because not a ton happened in it, but I'm don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I don't like it. I still love it. But just compared to the rest, it just felt more standard, I guess. It was more just like, oh, their food is running out, they need to get moving. But there were some cool things that they did, and the one thing that stood out to me was I really liked how they pointed out that the hadrosaurs traveled at night and slept during the day, like in the shadows of the dunes, because conserve energy because the sun isn't beating down on you. And also the stars were out, which, like some migratory animals today, they could use the stars as a navigation point. So I thought that was cool. But I think my favorite little detail that they put out there, besides the first thing I thought was cool was the Gypsum Desert. I've never heard of a Gypsum Desert being a thing before. It's so dry that the whole desert is made of gypsum. That was neat. But the other thing that was cool is when they made it to the top of the last big sand dune at the end of the episode, we saw them get this coating of like this misty, like watery coating on them. They all got wet, and that was because they sort of met the barrier between the ocean and the desert, if I'm remembering correctly. So the fog there was coating them with a wet coating, so their reward was getting to lick the droplets off of them because they were thirsty. So I thought that was really cool detail that they put in. And basically they make it to the ocean. And no, they don't make it to the ocean. They're making it towards the ocean, but they make it to a new little oasis, and that has enough food for them to stay sustained. And that right there is the episode. Another absolute banger of an episode. My favorite scenes? Oh, that's hard. Oh, that's a hard one. Yeah, honestly, I think my favorite scene is the Dreadnoughtus. I gotta go with the Dreadnoughtus. That was just one of the coolest dinosaur things I've ever seen, ever. But the Tarbosaurus Velociraptor scene was also really cool. And just the vibe the Tarbosaurus had was great. But I also really like the other scene I really like is the Barbary Dactylus scene. Everything with the Barbary Dactylus in this show so far is absolutely stellar. But yeah, anyway, that's episode 2, Deserts. I'm super excited. I'm actually going to be watching No, not Coasts. I just watched that. I'm going to be watching Freshwater in just a little bit here with my friends. We didn't get to watch it last night because one of us wasn't available. But I'm so excited to see that one because it has Dinokairos in it, which is one of my absolute favorite dinosaurs ever. So I'm excited to talk about that one once we see it. So stay tuned for that if you enjoy these talks. If you made it this far into the episode, leave a comment down below. Let's see, what's the code word? What's the code word for this one? Impostorous Among Us. There you go. Say Impostorous Among Us down below for the Barbary Dactylus sneak. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy Prehistoric Planet as well, or have been enjoying it. And I'll see you guys soon. So take care, and bye-bye.